I'm Lieutenant General Retired Les Smith. I'm the Vice President for Leadership and Education here at AUSA. We're going to continue the panels going. I'm going to introduce Ms. Lea Hurley, and as she comes up and her team comes up to introduce the next panel. Ms. Hurley is the Managing Director, Risk and Financial Advisory for Deloitte. As a Managing Director for Deloitte & Touche, she's a cyber leader in the government and public services practice. She has over 20 years of experience in the cyber domains, and some of her previous experience includes leading functional teams, implementing cybersecurity programs with the United States Census Bureau, and she also served in the United States Air Force. So let's give our next panel a round of applause.
All right, thank you very much. That was a great panel. I took a bunch of notes, put my stars. We're going to outdo that panel. I think that panel focused a lot on the zeros and the ones, right? The systems, whether those are operational or IT systems. We're going to talk about the people because systems are just systems and the workforce is what makes it all come together. So I am joined by a very distinguished panel here today, a very diverse panel. We have a pilot, we have a runner, we have a woodworker, and we have a yogi. And I'll leave it up to you to decide who is what. But first, we are privileged to have Ms. Maria Ciepiela joining us from Army MNRA. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Mr. Patrick Johnson, who is joining us from DoD CIO. Thank you, Patrick, for being here. Ms. Erica Ford is here from Ernst & Young. Thank you, Erica. And then finally, we have Terrance Westerfield, who is representing AWS. So I'll turn it over to you guys. You have far more compelling things to say about yourself than I do. Maria, did you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. Good morning. It is such a pleasure to be here today. Ma'am, thank you so much for this opportunity. It is Army's birthday, and as an Army civilian, I am really excited to be here today and with all of you. Talent management is certainly one of my huge passion areas. I started working for the Army as a senior in college. I went to Towson University, Baltimore, Maryland. I was a business major and started working at Aberdeen Proving Ground as my first assignment, helping with the closure of Fort Monmouth and its relocation to APG. So what a way to start my federal human resources career. But I've had a fantastic opportunity working with so many diverse missions, commands at the tactical, operational, and strategic level. And certainly strategic human capital management and talent management for the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow is one of my huge passion areas. So I'm looking forward to today's panel. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patrick Johnson. I'm the Director of Workforce Innovation, the WID. All right, that's an official change for John Sherman. And on his behalf, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I feel like, well, one, I'm coming home. Most of the meetings I'm in, I have to deal with the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the Air Force. So it's nice to be among family. 24 years in uniform. So it's always good to be back here and talk about this. Really want to stress today, I led a circuitous route to get to where I am. I came out of the special operations community. No one would have picked me to be sitting here and talking about talent management. I think coming out of high school was most likely to go to jail. So I had a very different route to get here, but it has given me a perspective on talent pipelines, how we acquire that, and taking a different approach. And we're going to get into that. And I think some of the speakers we've heard today, there's a real emphasis on permeability. I'm very passionate about that and developing multiple pipelines. And it's tied to our cyber workforce strategy, which we're also going to get a chance to talk about and highlight on this panel.
Hi there, this is Erica Ford. I'm going to tell on myself I am the yogi of the crew. And the reason why I wanted to share that was that, one of the great reasons why I got into teaching yoga, I've taught yoga for about 12 years, is that I love when I'm in a class and I can help people see their own strength, their own beauty, emphasize the things that they're growing in. And that is actually the thing that I find connection with my career and my focus on people, because I love helping people discover what they can do, take the roof off the possibilities, and see how they can grow and think differently about their careers from the perspective of truly being fully present so that they can do the work that needs to be done every day for the warfighter and certainly the constituents. I'm an Army brat, so I always think about the Army has really taken care of me. With my father, who was an Army intelligence officer and a pilot, came from a tiny, tiny place in Louisiana, and then we lived all over the world. So I have a great, deep respect from the Army and have supported the Army quite a bit over at Army, FMNC, and that kind of thing. When I think about cyber and I think about the AI conversation is really sharp these days. Chat GPT is interesting. I've been using it for various things. And the thing that, we always think about is that it's not either or with AI versus the person. And with cyber, a lot of times we focus so much on just getting the body, but what happens when they get there? Right. And so, it's really I know some of the things we'll talk about is really keeping the person at the center, the human at the center. And in doing that, doing all that investment in those folks, they will go to the moon and back for your mission when they feel like they are taken care of from a whole person, whole career, whole life perspective. And so really, that's why I'm excited to be here with these lovely folks today and talk more with you. Thank you.
Good morning, and Terrance Westerfield here from Amazon Web Services. Kind of a unique perspective on the panel and background. So a longtime Army civilian in the R&D space. I tell people that I came to the Army in 2003 as an engineering psychologist. So what that really means was not really smart enough to be an engineer, but too square and straight-laced to be a psychologist. So I joined at ATEC to figure out how we could make the equipment work better for the soldiers, but the soldiers figure out how to actually use the equipment in the right way. So it was an interesting start to an Army civilian career leading into R&D. So much of what we're talking about today, kind of, you can see woven through my background, kind of, as Mr. Johnson said, you wouldn't expect me to see me on a talent management team or a discussion panel. Most that have worked for me would say, we'd never want that guy. But at the end of the day, it really is about three things, and we hear it all the time. It's the people first, processes, and then the technology. So I think during the discussion today, we'll get a chance to talk about how our view, and we weave those together from both my former career, but also now continuing to support from an IT perspective. So,
All right, thank you. So the last panel talked a little bit and focused on, where we've been and today. What I think we'd like to dig in with you all is kind of where we are today and then looking forward, right? So when it comes to workforce, we probably can't even really imagine the skills that will be required in the next 10 to 15 years. But we know that there's high demand for career fields that didn't exist when we were deciding what we were going to do when we grow up, whether it's AI, ML, DevSecOps, cloud computing, right? So maybe we'll start at the top and then get a little closer to Army. Patrick, I'll start with you. What are you doing around workforce, making sure that we have a digital and data savvy workforce that can take on the future challenges?
So when Mr. Sherman, one of the first things he did was we sat down and prepped him for his briefings. And we started unpacking the workforce effort and everything that goes around that. And oftentimes, this was just after we completed a ZBR for the cybersecurity, and that's a zero-based review and IT workforce. And one of the things we looked at in that was we like the new shiny toys, but we don't necessarily train and bring the people along and the staff to operate said. And that highlighted some of the issues. And he said, you know what? You look at the National Defense Strategy, you look at the National Cyber Strategy, what is the workforce portion of that? Can you even remember? It generally tends to be a paragraph or a subset, and it doesn't carry the impact. It's very, very high level. He said, we need a standalone cyber workforce strategy. Right now, ONCD and the National Cyber Directorate is getting ready to put out a national workforce and education strategy. And we're helping support that. But he said, we need that. And he looked at Congress and said, we're going to deliver that. And we did. And we kept it really, really simple. If you've had an opportunity to look at our strategy, it's not 60 pages. It's very readable, but it has a very simple premise. You know, we looked at somebody like Google and their people team, and they had a simple philosophy. That is, find them, get them, keep them. And we said, we want to kind of keep it in that vein. So we had 4 pillars in the strategy, and the strategy is set against identification, recruitment, development, and retention. And then we build on that with objectives. We have, of that, 4 primary objectives, 29 separate objectives with 39 separate initiatives to that. And why is that important? We highlight that. That's going to be part of the implementation plan. And that is where the teeth is in the strategy and how we're going to get after this. One of the objectives that we do highlight of the 4 primary is a cultural change or a cultural shift that we have to achieve, and it's our most challenging in terms of how we manage workforce and how we look at this workforce. And first and foremost, when we're looking at this, and this goes back to the ZBR and the data we've gathered, is we say we have to have a better way of identifying the talent that we need and acquiring that talent. And it started with breaking with the traditional federal hiring process, looking at occupational series, because that was a construct that was developed in 1948, and it has not aged well. So we need a better way of identifying that talent and then going after it in training. On the military side, they do a pretty good job of that. Something else the military does is the military builds its own, and it does it really, really well. We need to replicate that on the civilian side and assist in our strategy, because it is a total force strategy. We have a force of about 225,000 in our cyber force, our cyberspace domain. Of that, it is split 3 ways. If you look at it, and I'm rounding errors on that, but it's about a third. And a third of that is our contractor workforce, a third civilian workforce, and then a third our military force. So looking at all that, how do we align and move that and make it complementary to each other? And more importantly, how do we recognize that this problem isn't a DoD problem? It isn't just a federal government problem, but is a national problem. So right now I have 30,000 vacancies across my cyber force. Not good. And if I'm looking at that compared to the national vacancy rates, we've heard the numbers, over 700,000 vacancies in various areas within that. There is a talent problem. And we recognize that with a strategy, we have to develop more pipelines into the Department of Defense. But what we're trying to drive is a paradigm shift. So demand far outstrips supply. So we're not going to hire our way out of this. There's no secret trove of people we're going to go to and tap and say, okay, that's our problem solved. We're going to have to look at multiple pipelines, and that consists of reaching out to the academic world. That consists of working out to industry, looking at apprenticeships, changing, all right? We're not eliminating education from the process. We recognize that training teaches us what to do now. Education teaches us how to think moving forward. We ask about what does the force of 2030 look like and what do we need? From my chair, it's almost impossible to predict I'm going to need this particular person with these particular skill sets. Rather focus on the ability to adapt and change rapidly. So I need a workforce that is a problem solver and capable of adapting quickly to any problem that comes down the line. And we do that through education and building that pipeline. At the same time, we increase our pipeline through training avenues. And that can be with industry, or that can be on the military side of the house, which they do really, really well. So looking at all those together, then how do I make it so these people can rotate seamlessly in and out, to include our reserve component? So we're looking at the permeability question and looking at barriers, because right now, at least on the civilian side, and to some extent the military side, it's designed to reward a 30-year, 20-year career. That's not what this workforce right now is looking at. If we look at tech, they average about 4 to 5 years in a particular place. They get paid well, but they're also worked very, very hard. It's not a good work-life balance oftentimes. Sometimes they don't last longer than 2 or 3 years. You know, the half-life of a software developer is like a goldfish. You know, if they're out of it and not refreshing and gaining their skills, okay, they quickly fall out because technology, the drive is changing that rapidly. Can we adjust to that? Can we look for other other avenues, other pipelines? Yes, we can. We're looking at not just on the academic side, but what other avenues we can flow into the Department of Defense. And what we want to create a situation where we are developing the talent for the rest of the nation, right? Because I think we do that better than anybody. And if we can't seat them in the Department of Defense, that's my first love, then I'm going to look at my other federal partners and say, do you have a home for this talent? And if I can't put them there, then we're going to go down to, and we had someone mention a program in which people in college going out to local and federal governments that love that program. And can we drive talent there? If we can't put it there, can we place them with our industry partners? So we're looking at that. How do we move that? How do we eliminate, especially on the civilian side, how do we eliminate those barriers? And on the military side. So imagine a concept where I come in, I serve 3 years, then I do a rotation out into industry, but I maintain protections and certain advantages that are acquired on the military side or the civilian side, and I'm able to come back. Now, there's challenges built with all that, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. We need to create that kind of revolving door and pool our talent, because again, not one person or one organization is going to solve it, but we train and we develop really well on the Department of Defense side. And I think we have the ability to kind of flip that paradigm in terms of supply. I'm okay with flooding the market with our talent because everybody we send out is an ambassador for the Department of Defense. If people look at us as a place to start their career, hey, I got a really good start, I got a really good deal, they are a walking advertisement to come in. We talked about messaging. I can't agree more. We do a terrible job, especially for our civilian workforce, in saying, hey, not only are we hiring, but here are all the benefits. We talk about salary, right? And we're working on that. It's not always about money, but we do need to at least be reasonably competitive, right? I'm not going to match Amazon when they say, well, we're going to pay you $250,000 or $300,000. In some instances, some of the authorities, our friends in Congress have given us, we are getting there where we can do that for certain key personnel. But for the vast majority, all right, they're not going to see $300,000. And by the way, Amazon doesn't pay everybody $300,000 a year either, all right, in terms of what they're looking at in terms of key talent. So I want to be able to put something up there that doesn't, when that person goes home to their family and say, well, I'm going to turn this job down, making $300,000. I'm going to take one that may only pay me $200,000. Right? You've got to do some explaining there to the home front why that difference is there. So we've got to do a better job of showing them. All right, here's the intangibles. All right, this is the advantage. This is the mission, and then here are the other things that come with it. And we talked about, they mentioned earlier, soldiers don't fight well if they're worried at their home. I love the special operations community because they do a very good job of taking care of families and ensuring that when those operators are forward, the only thing they have to worry about is the mission, because everything else is taken care of behind them. We can do that as a government, as a department, focus on, the little things and taking care of them and making them feel important. And you mentioned that it's critical. If I feel important and I feel like I'm treated well, guess what? I'm not looking for a job, right? Because I'm happy where I'm at. Even though I think I could make more money, you also have to weigh that in with, it also comes with a whole lot more pain and a competitive environment, almost a bit Machiavellian, where at the whim I could be laid off, and we're seeing that, some of the tech layoffs right now. So communicating that and keeping it in mind as we reach out. Something else I will say in terms of, we have about 30,000+ recruiters across all the services out there, drumming up to get on the military front. Across DoD, if we look at just dedicated civilian recruiters, we've got about 200. Now think about that. Some organizations, there are bright spots, but by and large, all right, we source the vacancies. When it goes vacant, okay, well, now we got to go fill the vacancy. And all of you who have been in the department know that pain and what you have to go through. How do we streamline that process and tie it into everything I've been talking about here? So it's a holistic approach. From a strategy perspective, we know, and Mr. Sherman was very clear to us in our direction. Don't be afraid to try it. Let's put it on the board. Don't tell ourselves no. Let other people tell us no and then tell us why. Challenge it. Put new ideas out there. And if it doesn't work, that's okay, because we'll learn from that, quickly adjust, put another initiative on the table because we know what we have to do. And then underlying all of this is a data-centric approach. We do a poor job oftentimes. The military does a pretty good job, but on the civilian side, in capturing civilian data, painting our picture and moving forward, especially when you go into budget fights and resourcing, because when budgets get tight, what's the first thing that suffers? When we look at our training, when efforts to upskill and move, stuff gets cut, right? How do we communicate that? How do we relay that a cyber operator, from an economic standpoint, for pennies on the dollar, does disproportionate damage and disruption to our enemies out of all whack with what we paid to put them in, versus a kinetic weapon system that is sitting on the shelf and we're not using on a daily basis. So it's communicating that message, right? Invest here for 25 cents on the dollar, and you're going to maximize your return into this workforce.
Yeah, I think the most compelling thing, Patrick, you talked about is the mindset shift around developing the talent for the rest of the nation. I don't think that in all the time that I've been working in this industry, that's been how the DoD has thought about that. So that's a really big paradigm shift. Maria, I'm interested. Now we are hearing a little bit about at the DoD level. Can you share with us specifically within Army how you're trying to tackle this problem?
Sure, absolutely. This is one of the things I'm really excited about. I'll start at the big Army level and then talk a little bit about some of our cyber initiatives. So in 2019, the Army signed the first ever, I do have it as a prop here, first ever Army People Strategy. And so we talk about so often that it's not just the weapon system that we put out on the field, it's the person behind it, the person that did all of the logistics to get it everywhere it needed to be, to do the maintenance on it, to operate, to train, to equip. It is the person that is most important. And so what the Army is doing is making such an intentional focus on purposeful talent management of the workforce. And this is applicable total force, military and civilian. Specifically talking on the civilian side of the house, another prop that I have is the civilian implementation plan to the Army People Strategy, which is how we will execute, how we acquire, develop, recruit, and retain the civilian workforce. And so this has been such a focused effort across all of Army. We've been very intentional about creating an infrastructure to create a career, a functional community, a career path for our individual civilians at the command level and certainly at the individual level. One of the things that we did in 2020 was actually take 32 individual career programs representing our civilians in their respective functional areas. And we said we need a much more intentional and centralized approach. And we need to be able to invest in our resources. So the Army established what is known as the Army Civilian Career Management Activity, which is part of the Civilian Human Resources Agency. So one umbrella where all of those 32 individual career programs were streamlined into 11 functional career fields, with the intention for us to be able to look across the career fields, where are the people and where do we need the people in the right position at the right time. We also did one of the big investments, or one of our big wins in about the 2020 timeframe, where we invested at the corporate level in our civilian workforce for resources to acquire, develop, employ, and retain. Looking across our internships, our fellowships, making methodical investments to say, do we have enough positions that we need across the force to be able to build the pipeline of talent that we need? How are we looking at our supervisory development courses? Are they responsive enough to the average, the modern supervisor, to ensure that they are equipped with the knowledge, the skills, the leadership abilities that they need to lead their forces? Looking at our leader pipelines, do we have a pipeline of talent for the next General Barretts in the force? And how do we get that person coming right in and getting them into that position where they can command and lead our forces that we have in Army? So we've had a number of intentional efforts to really put a huge emphasis on functional career management of the person, and how do we create avenues and paths and investments so that they have the opportunities available to them. One of the things I'm excited about on the cyber side of the house currently in my current position is our implementation of the Cyber Accepted Service Alternate Personnel System, which is a much more modern, agile, and flexible and responsive way that we can acquire, compensate, employ, and retain our talent. For so often, we at the federal level have been looking for the authorities that we need in order to be able, we're just kind of like incrementally going along, walking like penguins. Okay, this is how we can get the people that we need. And so with Title 10, with cyber accepted service, it allows for us to be much more proactive about finding the talent that we need and being able to quickly make on-the-spot offers, to quickly make the considerations. Hey, I'm interested in you, would love to have you come on board in the team. And then also being responsive that this is certainly, especially in the cyber domain, a very technical workforce. And as we look to prioritize things like certifications, qualifications, technical skills, technical experiences, sometimes, the workforce that it's coming in, we don't necessarily need to wait in order to be able to advance them to the next level when they can demonstrate the ability and the competence and the capability to perform at that particular level. And so this is certainly one of the great things that we're operationalizing now and testing out. How can we manage our people a little bit differently and be much more intentional and responsive? So just a couple of examples, but certainly at the big Army level and certainly in the cyber domain, talent management and intentional talent management is one of our big focus areas.
Intentionality is very important there. If not, you get kind of lost, right, with all the different things you could do. So Erica, Terrance, we're a third of the supply, right? And even the words that Patrick and Maria were using, I don't know what happens in your meetings, but same thing: attract, develop, retain, leadership pipeline planning, investment, learning and development. Can you talk about, from your perspective, the things that your company is doing to make sure that we as industry partners really do have the supply that is necessary to help fill that workforce?
I'm going to go quick, Terrance, so you can chime in because I want to nerd out. I forgot to nerd out with these two, so I want to make sure I get to nerd out with you when you chime in. There's two things that I want to flag that builds off of what you were talking about and then goes to the question that is asked, is that oftentimes there's a gap when you look at your recruiters between being able to tell the story that you just laid out, Maria, about the career path and all of the programs. And there's also a gap often between the hiring manager and the civilian being hired, or even when you have your Army soldiers out, just being able to, as they recruit, being able to really tell a compelling story about what it would be like day to day doing the work that they do. And often folks get really tied into all the mechanics because there's so much mechanics of getting someone in the door, when you're working on the public sector side. But one of the things that is always important to remember is that when you're recruiting, one of the golden rules is as many times as you can interact with a candidate along the recruiting cycle, whether a soldier or whether a civilian, the greater probability that that person is going to accept and actually not only accept, show up on board and start, right? And so, one of the things as we transition to the question that's being asked is, when you're looking at your mechanics of the recruiting activities, how are you educating your hiring managers, educating your recruiters that are doing recruiting soldiers, and educating the recruiters doing civilian hires to be able to talk about that and talk about it with passion in terms of what it looks like once you get here. So to that point, when we talk about we really focus on the skills development piece of it, at EY. And one of the things that you'll often see is that I think we've all met that data strategist, the senior data strategist, the one that gets it, that can be in any room with any function. They can integrate, they can ideate, they're thinking big, they integrate. Then you sometimes see the senior data person who wants to talk about widgets and where things go in a particular app. And you can't actually talk about the business piece of it, right? And so all of that leads back to, how are you building out skills in a way that is building out skills in a way where there's such a foundation that you can increase the probability that you're going to keep the data geeks that can do the technical and have a career path, but also the folks that can think big about data and be a data advocate when you're talking about broader strategy. So one of the things that EY has done is we've created something called Skills Foundry. which has been really fun to learn about and to talk to folks about. And really, I'm going to talk about Skills Foundry, but it could be any tool that is out there. So for Skills Foundry, one of the things that we did is there's something in it called a workforce blueprint. And what it is that it's loaded with like EY skill insights, it's loaded with industry insights, and it's loaded with just all kinds of other data that's just going on with the workforce and trends and that kind of thing. It's loaded. And part of what we do is we will do a workforce blueprint that basically describes, based on that and based on your particular mission and what you're looking for, this is the way ahead in terms of the kind of skills that you should be looking to develop, 3 to 5 years to the right, based on what we know now, with a little bit of with also knowing that anything can change. So building into that skills blueprint, that blueprint is essentially this idea of how flexible you have to be when things change, right? So that's also part of it. So you have this blueprint, like, this is what my organization is going to need over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of skills. This is what we need. Now the tool also allows you to then do a skills assessment on who's with you based on that. So you can see where your existing gaps are. You can then, from those existing gaps, compare that to the blueprint, and then you can work to kind of define your way forward on that. And think about it from an infrastructure perspective. What's the career path? How does that fit? How do we fill these gaps based on what we've set up from a professional development perspective? And then also to the strategy piece, how does it line up to our strategy? Can we even achieve our strategy based on the gaps that we see right now? And of course, we're going to achieve our strategy, but like right now, could we achieve it if we needed to achieve it tomorrow? And so that way allows you to really start building a compelling, very detailed approach where you can pull in the right stakeholders and all be working towards this blueprint when everybody can see it. So that's one thing that we're doing. And one of the things that's really cool about it is that the first module that we put in it was around data and that baseline of data knowledge that everyone should know, whether you are the data tech geek or you are just the person and day to day in your role. You need to be data conversant so that you can contribute to problem solving and you can be aware enough that you're making those considerations to bring those folks in. And that's the baseline of training, even before you get to the workforce blueprint. So super, super fun. And then Terrance, I want to geek out with whatever you have to.
And I know geek is meant in an absolute most loving way.
It is.
So with that, I guess, a couple of things combined, and, Mr. Johnson, mentioned several kind of bold ideas that clearly resonate given my background as a civilian that we certainly weren't doing when I left the Army in 2020. But a few of those things that come up, and Ms. Ford mentioned, like during the recruiting, the ability to actually that time to value, if you will, getting through the pipeline faster and the number of touches. I know that's something within AWS that we focus on very heavily is how much we're talking to that potential candidate, how quickly the turnaround and response is from, an initial resume review to scheduling a phone call to scheduling an interview. And those things are hard metrics that we look at daily because there is a fact. The more you interact, the more touches, the more likely you are to get that candidate. So that's one area that we certainly can, geek out on quite heavily. But a couple of other things that come up throughout the discussion this morning, we've heard a lot about the training and getting the training. What I would challenge is it's not just the training, but creating that culture of learning, making it easier for the workforce, both military and the civilian side, to reach and access trainings that aren't typically part of that prescribed training path. That does a couple of things. Obviously, engagement of the workforce, continuous upskilling of the workforce, but also creates opportunities for engagement and internal mobility. As we look at the military side, as you're moving up through the ranks, you're looking at well-rounded and the ability to move and lead different organizations and that breadth of experience. I'm not so sure that we do as good a job on the civilian side of that. And it's really, we take our best technical folks and move them into management and then a leadership role, and they kind of get narrow focused. I say that as going back to that culture of learning to create that mobility so that the civilian workforce has exposure across different types of things, whether that's IT and cloud, or understanding that same impacts on the logistics community or CBRN, and creating that ability to move laterally more easily, all based on that foundation of accessibility to learning opportunities, whether that's short snippet, 30-minute online modules, or, regimented formal training programs. The other piece of that, we heard discussion about the permeability. I think that also is part of that same mobility idea of, not only formally leaving government, going to industry, coming back, but how do we open up the dialogue on those training with industry, or those internships, externships, to make it easier to move back and forth? Yes, it's painful to lose, your star person for 3 months, 6 months, a year to go out, but they come back so much better. So how do we make that easier both directions to do those industry exchanges, or some of the things that we look at and talk about on a daily basis? In terms of the Amazon Web Services side, some of the things that we're doing, programs like what we call Skill Builder, that are online, free, open training for anyone. And it's across the spectrum of IT topics, whether that's specifically cloud things, but also networking, security, architectures, and any of those things that would create opportunities to expose content. Because as Ms. Ford said, it's about not only leadership discussions with the workforce, but the ability to speak those same nouns and verbs and be conversant. Maybe not technically savvy as our experts, but be able to be conversant and have those conversations to shape and help find that next position to grow the workforce and grow our replacements. So just a couple of thoughts kind of across the spectrum of topics that we've talked about already.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I want to try to get some comments or questions from the audience in as well. So we talked about a technical workforce, right? We talked about the badge of honor, I'm a geek, right? We talked about the data architect who speaks in weird languages that most people don't understand. But the question from the audience is, what about the non-technical folks that are required as a part of this workforce, right? Many strategies do focus on the training and the recruitment of the highly technical folks. But how are you attacking building the competence level and building the workforce of people that are adjacent, that might upskill or cross-train into cyber, or just a part of the team, but still need to be there?
Lea, I'll take the first start at that. I think that's an excellent question. And it makes me think about one of the comments General Barrett made in her opening remarks about it takes a village, and the critical enablers that we have in our force are absolutely as important as some of our very highly specialized technical skills. Because we, the Army, as a total force, we need each and every single person to be able to come and do their part and to be part of a team effort. And that's certainly, having that integrated team is absolutely still very much essential to what we need to do in order to succeed at the mission. Talking about the career fields again, one of the things that we've done in Army, that's actually one of the big areas where, when we looked at streamlining our individual career programs into 11 career fields, it was very intentional to look at what are the like skill sets that we have and what are the like occupations that we have, so that as you come in to perform X job, it's not your only path that you have. You certainly have other avenues. In Army, we have on the civilian side over 500 occupational series that we employ each and every single day, over 500 occupational series. So that's actually something that, as an individual Army civilian, it's important for you to be able to know what are all of the different options that you have available to you. The DCWF, the Defense Cyber Workforce Framework, is a great way and a great thing that we're using as a sample, as an example in the cyber realm, to be able to drill down a little bit more at granularity of the skills that are related to that particular occupational series or that particular function. So it allows for us to be much more responsive to, you're performing this type of task today. And as we look to build cross-functional teams, as we look to be able to respect the diversity of experiences and respect the diversity of skills that we all bring, it is certainly a cohesive and united effort that I could be performing a human resources job, but I absolutely need to be able to be working with my cyber functional counterparts to be able to help me understand what you do each and every single day so that I can advocate for the resources that you need. Help me understand your operational missions. And so a lot of it is really not only the teams that we're putting forward together, the cross-functional teams, being respectful of the roles that each of us play and understanding the value that the person's role has to succeeding at the mission, but then looking at truly from a developmental standpoint, I can come into the Army in this particular occupation, but here's the vast opportunities that I have available to me. What is it that I need to do in order to be able to progress? Is it a training opportunity? Is it an experiential opportunity? How can I be able to, either through education, through qualification, certifications, move and navigate to something that is of interest to me and that I certainly have the capability to be able to perform as well? Certainly open to others on the
So
table.
I'll send you the check for plugging the DCWF, because the work role coding is really what underpins our efforts and what we're doing. And the enablers are a huge part of that. Look, the cyber domain is multifaceted. So it's not just one thing. We right now have 71 work roles spread across IT, cybersecurity. Right now it's called cyber effects, but this is really the cyber mission force, the operation force. We're syncing that up with US Cyber Command. We'll be adding additional work roles, so we're completely aligned, and that will help us in terms of compensation. We're actually paying compensation based on work roles, not an occupational series or MOS. So by setting up our work roles, we can identify our enablers and how they support. More importantly, let's take acquisition. Huge play in this field in terms of what they need. So what do we need to give them to be more effective and partner with them? And you look across to R&E, how we've broken out software. So originally we had 2 work roles around software and software development. Now we've broken that out to an additional 6, and looking at that from an engineering perspective and how we do that. So creating methods to capture our enablers, because even when we look at AI, I like to say that General Barrett brought up a really good point. A lot of people like to say, well, we're not cyber and we don't play on that, and throw that over to the CIO. But the reality of it is, if you work in ones and zeros and that's what your platforms are based off of, you're all part of the family. And I look at that cyberspace domain as that big area to include those enablers. So it's not just focus on our geeks, because they're the ones that rule the world. It's focus on everybody and show them where they fit in the picture and how they support the overall mission.
The 2 points that I wanted to add to that, one of the things we're doing quite a bit with our clients is rethinking their performance goals and shifting the thinking on how they're written. And the way that I say that, one of the quickest ways that you can impact culture is to change your performance goals and performance expectations. It's the root of any kind of cultural change. But when we're talking about, I'm so excited to hear about how you all are thinking around defining how everyone fits, right? Regardless of the role, the blue collar and the white collar jobs. One thing that just brainstorming right now that could be thought about is what expectations do you set for your SES leadership, your GS-15s, your middle management? When the folks that are doing the day-to-day GS-12s, whatever makes sense, around what are the performance expectations about what they understand about everybody's roles. I think it would be interesting to think about 2 or 3 goals that you could incorporate in your expectations, and then giving examples for what good looks like if they are showing up that they have that knowledge. And so the reason why I think that would be really cool to come as a complement to what you all are talking about is that it shows as they are going to be showing that behavior to everyone underneath them. And to my original point about when people feel supported and seen, invested in, they will go to the moon and back for the mission. So that's one lever you can pull when you're thinking about this and pushing that. The other thing that I also wanted to mention, sometimes I lose my train of thought, so I'm going to try to remember it really quickly. Oh, the other thing that I would think about too is that one thing that we do a really good job at EY with, and we push our clients on, is what's next. So a lot of times when you're working day to day, you're focusing on what's right now and what's a little bit to the right. And that's just because the nature of how much is going on, especially with the Army, where there's such a dynamic mission. There's so many people who are working so hard, right? It's so easy to do. But another element of getting to this broader adoption about how everyone fits is, can you facilitate an environment where there are several opportunities as a group to talk about what's the next big threats that we anticipate over the next 3 to 5 years? What's our current thinking about those threats? What are the things that we don't know that we need your insight on? And you don't just go to the cyber and the data SMRs, you're talking to your HR, because there's a recruiting element, a retention element likely to that. You know, you talk to different people in your operations group because they have a play and being able to support where that is going and facilitate conversations. And again, there's so many ways you could do it. Periodic all hands, every now and then asking, you know, leaders of different commands to focus on. There's so many ways you could operationalize that. That could be really powerful. And again, getting to what we're talking about, is it that we all have a role, blue or white collar jobs, we all have a role in what's next and helping us be ready for those next threats we need to think about now.
So I want to pivot, Terrance, and maybe I'll start with you. Got to keep the panel on time. That's my job as moderator. It's really awesome to hear about all the things you guys are doing and pushing on. I think it's as important to acknowledge, you all have referenced it in some way, shape, or form. This is still really, really hard, right? We're talking about cultural change. We're talking about just thinking about the model and how we drive our careers differently. So, and this is related to an audience question, what's not working? What are one of those failures that you were encouraged to just embrace and move on from? And then how do you even know? So how are you measuring success? And then the inverse of that, being able to recognize when something isn't working. And maybe we can start with you, Terrance.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we talk about often is having to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and the small iterative changes towards an aggressive top-down goal. And so aggressive top-down goal is something that's set by leadership that is harder or faster than what the unit or organization would do organically or naturally. So setting a goal that's going to be aggressive, and then what are the data elements or what are the metrics that you use to then measure that progress. So that's the hard part. It's got to be done up front, is defining that aggressive goal, and then the metrics, and acknowledging that those metrics you come up with may not be the right ones, and being able to pivot on the metrics 30 days in, 45 days in. Again, looking at them routinely, that it's all about iterative change. So much like the software development community of agile, minimum viable product, it's the same thing with cultural change or transformation. It's what is that little iterative thing to get moving. And a quote that I heard some time ago is, it's like a bowl of spaghetti. We're not trying to figure out how to be master spaghetti eaters and twirling it right. Cut it up, eat it one little piece at a time, and figure it out and move forward in that regard. An organization that's not stagnant in terms of its people means the business isn't stagnant. So keeping things moving, dynamic, iterative changes are a couple themes that we talk about internally all the time. But as we're out talking to Army units, the same ideas. How do we help get started and then figure out, what has to change along the way with that North Star vision, that aggressive goal?
I think from the strategy point of view, all right, so we have this nice strategy, but it means nothing if we don't have implementation behind that. So when we built out those goals, and this goes back to, it's a multifaceted domain and has a lot of different players in it. One of the things we did is we brought the services, we brought the functional communities and the representatives in, and we said, all right, these are the things we can measure using our workforce and our framework. We can do this in the Advana system, which is used at the DoD level to kind of hoover up everything and put this enterprise data at the table. What else should we be looking at? And then working with them to say, is this an achievable goal? Let's do this. And then laying in the metrics that go behind it. And the biggest thing, and generally when we do these strategies, especially around workforce, they'll set up a line of effort. We'll go to meetings, and you have one or two that actually bring something to the table, and everybody else says, not my monkey, not my circus, right? And they sit back and watch. It's involving your Office of Primary Responsibility, who has responsibility identifying that, and not taking a strategy about what we, CIO, are going to do, but what we as a department are going to do, and this is your part in it. And identifying that and saying, okay, you come to the table, these are the things we're asking you to do. That's how are you going to get after that? And looking at the OCRs too, also involving them along the way. Because from a CIO's perspective, we can slap the table and say you're going to do X. And frequently, as I learned coming into the department, that's not how the services always work. All right. So they have a mind of their own. How do we involve and get that buy-in, message that, and show value in what we're doing? And that's really the biggest thing. I like to say in any of my efforts, if you can't see value, then I'm doing something wrong. I need to go back, either change my message or change what we're doing. And if you can see value in it, then I've got your organization to drive that change. And that's really kind of what we're focused on.
A couple of things that we've seen. So I spend a lot of my time on the DoD side, but I also do state and local work. Right now, I've been doing a lot of work with public transportation organizations when I'm not focused on the Army and other DoD organizations. But one of the things that was really powerful when we talk about things going wrong, and I think they'd be okay with me saying this, the New York MTA that does the subway and the buses systems and that kind of thing. And, they had 60 critical roles that had been sitting on the shelf forever, and they really needed help to figure out how to tackle it. And one of the things that was really powerful in terms of looking at what wasn't working and what should change as we were helping them tackle that, is that what we discovered is that it's amazing how little people will talk. They will get very focused on their particular role, and they are doing their role really well. They're all in for the mission. But it is incredible sometimes the assumptions that are being made. And it's also incredible how people can talk and feel like they have the same vision. But once you get into the nuggets of it, you are talking about two different planets. And so one of the things that we've really, and that work that we've done is, and helping with that, they're an amazing client. They're one of my favorites right now, is, we help them, in terms of filling these roles. But one of the things that they said, we did these, it was like a 3-day surge effort, everybody all on deck to do these interviews and stuff. And we did these daily debriefs. And one of the clients there said, we discovered the power of collaboration through working these critical jobs together. And, it gave me chills to even say it, because I'm remembering what it was like to be there. And so that is one of the things, is figuring out who's not talking, right? And when there's new leadership that come in and they have a vision, they've been given like a direction and they're all in for that vision, one of the mistakes that they can make is that they don't take time to understand previous trauma at the organization and previous things that did not go well for whatever reason. And so then it creates this situation where it's harder for that leader to get the buy-in and get the people to imprint with him or her. And then it also slows transformation down because everybody is reeling from not being seen. So when I look at the transformations that we've done, and this is separate from New York MTA, but in general, having worked on a lot of transformations, that's the thing that costs people money. That's the things that lose your top talent. And those are the things where you have leaders that can totally do a job, but because of the way that it started off, it's hard to get it back on track. So when we think about things that go wrong, that's one place to really, really dig into.
Yeah, one of the first things I do when I assume a new role is tell me where the dead bodies are buried in the backyard, right? That's the most important question you can ask. Okay, so one more kind of combined question from the audience, and then maybe we'll move to closing remarks. How are you guys thinking about alternative talent pools, whether it's National Guard or neurodiverse, neurodivergent workforces? How are you thinking about bringing that untapped source into your workforce strategies?
So I'll start with this one. I think that's such a powerful and important question, and certainly goes back to when we think about, especially in Army, building diverse and integrated teams. So certainly, and kind of dovetailing on one of the challenges that you talked about, one of the challenges that we're still facing, certainly in Army, is just building awareness of Army civilian employment. We generally find that the public does not necessarily know about the opportunities that they have for civilian employment. and the ability that they have to serve their nation and to serve the public as a civilian in that capacity. So some of the things that we certainly are doing is being much more, again, intentional about building strategic partnerships with academia, public-private industries, as well as just even our industry partners, really having the outreach associated. So there's a difference between outreach and recruitment. And outreach is really important in order to be able to spread the messaging. But again, there has to be, I think, as Terrance mentioned, so many different touch points that you have in order to be able to ensure that it's outreach. We're building awareness of the civilian employment opportunities, but then here's what's available to you. And then following through when you know that you can make a match because you know you have a mission requirement, you have the talent match. And so we're looking to be able to secure an actual win on the employment side of the house. We certainly have at the big Army level a focus and a much larger emphasis, especially on the neurodivergent communities as well. Really emphasizing that there are several different types of hiring authorities that you have for individuals with disabilities. But not only that, it's important as supervisors, so supervisors of individuals with disabilities, making sure that there's resources in place from an accommodation standpoint. So I think that's one of the things that's really important is building supervisors as we're looking to effectively get our teams in place, having them be prepared with the resources that they need in order to effectively manage their talent and be responsive of some of those accommodations.
Is it okay if I'm sorry, we getting ready to go?
You can go.
Oh, I'll keep it to 30 seconds. Neurodiversity, so untapped. We get so focused on the white collar jobs. There's blue collar jobs that folks with a diverse background can kill at in terms of working in different warehouses, checking things, comply. There's so much there. So it's all in for the white collar, the data analytics stuff, all in. But let's not forget about the blue collar jobs where where there's such an untapped talent there as well. The other piece too is that always remember when you're recruiting neurodiverse talent, it looks different. The model for recruiting them is totally different. So it's like, so instead of like having them meet one-to-one with people and doing the traditional interview, you might do scenario-based interviews where they come in and they work in a space and you're talking about things in the space that they work to give them an energy, a feel for it. You might approach something a little bit more indirectly in terms of evaluating whether they're a fit, just because you're accommodating for just some of the nuances that come with diverse folks. And remember, neurodiverse is OCD, it's ADHD. There's which is probably, there's so many people that you work with that have ADHD and don't talk about it. And so just to remember that, because the neurodiverse is such an untapped, they are generally underemployed. And part of it, you've got to shift your thinking about the recruiting market to make it experience-based and relationship-based, and that will get the right folks in the door.
So I know when we prepped for this panel, we knew we were going to run out of time. We're all very passionate about this and we are running out of time. So maybe we'll start with you, Terrance, and come back this way. If you could just provide your closing remarks, maybe it's your one aha moment, your light bulb, what your innovation is and what you're chasing after next, anything that you'd like to leave this group with.
So just a final comment on the neurodiversity thing. I think the other piece is not just the recruiting, but once internal, for us, we call them affinity groups, but those groups to allow folks that identify that similar way, whether that, it's an engineering or military affiliation, but those affinity groups and to allow folks that identify in different categories to relate and meet and share with experiences with one another is something that we have to make sure we do. In terms of a closing comment, I think obviously from an AWS perspective, I go back to my opening comment. It's people, processes, and technology. And how do you integrate the three of those together to not only optimize the human performance, but the infrastructure, the IT, the people, processes, and being willing to iteratively change all three of them. And how do we create that ecosystem where it's constantly changing, it's agile, so that we can move forward in a more transformational way, long-term, based on a North Star vision. So
I have to, unfortunately, race out of here to go to the Pentagon for a meeting right afterwards. But I just wanted to say thank you and then give it to Mr. Johnson, since I felt like I got in front of him the last time. So, Mr. Johnson?
No, you didn't get in front of me. The one thing I would look, and it kind of follows on the last one, is develop multiple training pipelines. I like to say we have to build our own bench. And to do that, that means we have to go out where not to the usual places that talent's acquired. So if everybody's shopping at MIT for a certain skill set, can't find it because they only graduate X number of that skill set, we need to go to other places because that's not the only place it's made. We need to turn over every rock where we can find that talent and acknowledge, right? Go into our junior colleges, go down into our high schools, that outreach, that building, the talent we need now, we should have started building it 10 years ago with touch points in middle school and on. So I'll leave you with that.
So first of all, lastly, it's been such a pleasure joining everyone today. Just a couple of things. I know we highlighted on so many different workforce transformation areas, examples, ideas. Change is hard, and modernizing your workforce is going to be one of those battles that we're going to continuously have to do, especially on a proactive front. One of the things that I think is so important to leave you with is building strategic workforce plans, using the data that you have, looking at your workforce of today and thinking about what do you need for your workforce of tomorrow. And that will help drive what are the acquisition strategies that we need to put in place. Where do we need to put functional, technical, leader, certification, development strategies in place? Who are the next leaders that we need to identify? Again, who's the next General Barrett in your force? And you need to put them on intentional assignments so that they can lead great forces of the future. And then how do we retain our talent? And what quality of life programs are we putting in place so that, as what was mentioned in the last panel, when someone who comes to their work every day knows that their family is taken care of, it is a win for the Army and it is a win for that person. So thank you again.
All right, thank you, panelists. Hopefully you all have learned something here today, either validation of the things that you're doing and you need to keep doing them, or maybe just sharing some of the failures and some of the challenges that still exist out there. So again, thank you. It was a wonderful time.
Thank you.